So this is a curb find self-propelled Craftsman lawnmower. Has the ready start. I think this thing is going to need a little bit of work done to it, but surprisingly it doesn't need much. I'm just going to take the carb apart and clean it out on principle, but that'll be in the next video. But I wanted to just show you guys this. The guy actually was outside. He had just put this out to the curb when I passed by it, and the only thing wrong with it, aside from not having gas in it, was that. So I noticed that the spark plug wire is missing the boot. And it was unplugged, so I just plugged it back into the spark plug and pulled the cord, and there was a little bit of gas still left over in the carburetor, and it fired up. So I decided to take a little bit of a gamble, threw some gas in it. I cleaned off the deck a little bit. Need to hit it with the pressure washer. But listen to this. You guys can probably hear it running kind of funny, so it definitely needs at least a carburetor cleaning and maybe the spark plug regapped, but I might just end up keeping this one and getting rid of some of the other ones. Alright, so as you guys saw in the first part of this video, this thing does run. Kind of runs weird, kind of has a wonky idle, so I might end up keeping this thing until I can at least find a bag for it, because around here, if you sell a lawnmower with the bag, that shoots the value up tremendously. So I've already looked in my hoard of bags and other stuff, and I don't have a bag that'll fit on this one. So I'm just going to keep this thing around, at least until I can ever find a bag, if I ever do, and kind of go from there. But everything else on it works. It runs okay. The blade is okay. The self-propel even works, which really surprised me because it doesn't feel like there's all that much tension on the cable, and plus it's got a bend in it. So I was thinking about just replacing that, but it still seems to work okay, so I might not even worry about that. But I think I do have an extra self-propel cable that's this exact type. I'm not 100% about that, but I'm pretty sure I've already got one. So if I've already got one, I'll just end up replacing it. But what we're going to do right now is pull the carburetor off, and being that this is my second favorite kind of Briggs engine, it's pretty easy to do that. So let's go ahead and start pulling her apart. Pull the air filter off. Air filter could do to be blown out, but it looks like it was replaced at least within the past year or so. So I'm not going to really worry about replacing that just yet. The first order of business is pinch off the fuel line, which could probably do to be replaced as well. Actually, it's not in that bad a condition, so we might just leave that alone. Fuel line pinched off. Pull the air filter. And we have an air filter box gasket that needs to be replaced. No surprise there. That might even be why this thing is running kind of funny. And based on what I'm seeing here, it was replaced before, because I'm not seeing any part of the gasket that's broke off of this one, but there is pieces of old gasket that are still on here. So it looks like somebody has gotten into this thing before me. Let's see. It looks like I do need to take that top cover off. Easy enough. Do a preliminary Black Widow check. Looking good on that note. So, governor vane from the carburetor. You have two bolts on the left, or on the right rather, and the left of the carburetor, and those are 3/8. So we'll pull those out. Move that back. Now we can pull that other bolt out. and I'll meet you guys at the workbench. Alright, so I'm about to stick this carburetor into my ultrasonic cleaner. But first we're going to take it apart and kind of give it a good once over, make sure everything's okay. So we'll pull the bowl off, and it's definitely in need of good cleaning. So we'll stick this into the parts cleaner. Stick the gasket over there. Pin's okay condition. Not going to worry about that. I do have more needle seats, so again, I'm not worried about putting those in the cleaner or not. So maybe that's why it wasn't wanting to run properly. So it looks like the automatic choke was kind of locked in place. So we'll pull that apart too. These are really easy to take apart. You just kind of want to be careful. But they're just pressed in there, and the only thing that's holding them in there is the plastic, these little tangs that are on it. So if you're worried about putting this back in correctly, just take the rod out, stick it back in. They can really only go in one way, so just kind of leave that where it is. But now that that's out, what happens with the old fuel is it kind of congeals up and becomes all nasty and stops that automatic choke linkage from working properly. So we'll stick this whole thing into the carb cleaner, the parts cleaner, and just for the hell of it, we'll pull this one out too, even though this one's okay. So there we go, mostly disassembled carburetor. We'll stick it into the parts washer. Now I'm going to be running this at a 480-second increment, and I'm not going to be doing it on camera because this thing creates a lot of interference for the microphone on my camera. So I'm just going to turn this thing on, and I'll tell you guys I'm going to run it 2, 3, maybe 4 times and change the angle of the carburetor and such. So we'll turn it on. I'll meet you guys when we're done. Alright, so it's had about 5 runs in it. So I've got a new bowl gasket, set that aside. Here's the old bolt gasket. I forgot to mention I did put the bolt in there, the bowl bolt. So no need to worry about that for those of you that are. Pull the carburetor out. I've already pulled the bowl out. And then we'll leave the bolt here. Kind of clean it up a bit before we reinstall it. These bolts, these are often the most sensitive parts on these carburetors. Kind of good to keep somewhat clean, and a regular wire brush will clean them up right quick. And I've already gone through with my safety wire here and went through these holes before I dumped everything in, and it's nice and clean now. So that's ready for reinstallation. So all of these still work accordingly. And they do. So let's reinstall it on the lawnmower. Aside from the fuel line, the carburetor's back on. So now I'm just going to reinstall our filter box gasket. Alright, so the carburetor and air filter box have been put back on. I'll lock the handle down. I have not tried to start this yet. Runs a lot better. runs a lot better. It actually does an okay job cutting some of this stuff too. Obviously there's no real grass coming back yet because it hasn't rained enough, but it gets all the small stuff just fine. Let's test out this, see how well that works. I really like having this feature on a lawnmower. Normally what I do to clean the decks off of any pusher or any of the riders I've had is I just put the hose underneath the deck kind of like that and just let the lip sit on the metal part of the hose and just run the hose, and it kind of does the same thing, but I guess this kind of removes some of the unsafetiness of doing that, though I've never had a problem.